Okay, hi everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, great. So I am Kristen Body. I'm the Membership and Events Manager at the Asheville Art Museum. I want to thank you all for being here for today's member program. I'm really excited to have Lauren Brunk with us today from Brunk Auctions, and she'll talk to us a little bit about the auction house, introduce us to some of their specialists and tourists around the gallery. Before I turn this over to Lauren, I do just want to go over some housekeeping for all attendees. So please note that everyone's microphones are muted by default. And we are recording today's program, as I mentioned in the chat box. So if you prefer not to be recorded, please make sure that your video remains off. Both the microphone and video camera symbols at the bottom left of your screen will have red lines through them to indicate that they're off. And this recording will be shared tomorrow in our museum e-blast and on our YouTube channel. And if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please type it into the chat box, which you should also find at the bottom of your screen. And I encourage you to ask questions as we go. I'll read those to Lauren when we get to appropriate stopping points. And so I also ask you to please let us know if there's anything you think we can do to improve these programs via Zoom. I'll send out an evaluation after the program's over to get your feedback that way. And finally, as you probably know, some wonderful news. The museum is finally reopening. Today is our first day of being open to members, and that will continue through Friday. Then on Saturday, we'll open to the general public. And so after being closed for nearly 6 months, this is really wonderful, and we are so grateful to our members for their continued support throughout our closure and during that difficult time. And I hope to see many of you at the museum in the coming weeks. And I also hope you'll encourage your friends to come and visit us and maybe also become members. We have lots of new safety protocols in place, and you can find more details about those and how to register for time tickets on our website at ashevilleart.org. And in a little bit, I'll put that in the chat box as well for you, so you have a direct link. And yes, time tickets are required for both members and non-members, so please do get those in advance. We have limited capacity right now and limited tickets available for each time slot. And so whether or not you'll be visiting us in the near future, I did also want to let you know that we will continue these programs via Zoom for the foreseeable future, so everyone can keep enjoying that from the safety of their home. So thank you again for being here, and now I will turn this over to Lauren.
Are we on?
There you go.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for your Asheville Art Museum lunch break. Andrew is going to start us off with a little bit of history about Brunk Auctions, how long we've been here, what we do, and please do send in questions as we go along. We're happy to address whatever questions you have, but I'll be touring you through in just a few minutes, but Andrew will get us started.
The Zoom thing is pretty new. I'm used to people in the room who can ask questions and so on. And so I don't know how many of you are completely new to us here. I grew up in Asheville. It's a business that my father started in 1983. So we're going on 37 years here. And so we're in the auction business, and that means we are selling things for people that are deaccessioning for one reason or another. That might be museums, it might be collectors, it might be estates. There was sort of a long-going sort of the 3 Ds of, of where things come from, and it was always death, divorce, and debt. And now we've added downsizing, so it's the 4 Ds. But lots of people are changing gears, and maybe they have 3 houses and they're going to 2 condos and that sort of thing. So we work all over the country, really, but with a focus on the Southeast. And you'll see things pass through the gallery here that come from estates and collections all over the Southeast and elsewhere. And we're excited about the William Banks estate. He was a collector very focused on classical American things. You see us here with George Washington and those sort of the classicism of the early 19th century and its roots in ancient Rome and all of that. It was very much his focus. But we also sell things, we've sold, Chinese collections and ancient art and contemporary and modern art, and jewelry and all sorts of things that we're able to bring to market and put in front of an audience of people who appreciate them and find new homes for them. So we're right here on Tunnel Road, and the business has changed in those 37 years quite a lot. We've grown a lot, and Lauren and I both did, our stint in New York City at the, big auction houses up there and at museums and so on. And we've been back in Asheville. Lauren's been in Asheville now 15 years or so. And it's a great place to call home. We're very happy to be back here. And, it's great fun to be able to bring sometimes really significant works of art to market here in Little Asheville, North Carolina. And the market continues to be very global, and our ability to reach sort of far and wide is better and better, with the internet and the changes that COVID have brought. People are more and more used to seeing things online and having those interactions happen virtually, just like our conversation now. We can do previews with people on FaceTime or Skype or what have you, and look closely at objects under the bright lights, even though people aren't here in the room. So making those adjustments and figuring out ways to keep bringing things to market, pick things up and bring them in here and bring them to market in ways that are safe, both for our staff and for clients, is something that we've had to do, just like you all and the rest of the world, make those adjustments. But the sale this weekend should be an exciting one, and I know Lauren and some of the other specialists are going to, give you a little window into what they're doing, what they're working on, and how we look at objects and the sort of the scrutiny and care that goes into vetting things, looking for condition issues, looking for authenticity issues, and also identifying who's going to want these things. What people want has changed pretty dramatically. What we often hear is, my kids don't want any of this stuff. And, as people sort of
with that voice.
Exactly. Like they don't want any of it for free. So, as the market changes and what people want changes, we have to sort of navigate that and find ways to market things effectively. If the market has gotten narrower over the last 10 or 20 years, some markets have expanded and some have contracted. So we're always looking to navigate that and find ways to bring things to market, in a creative and effective way. And it's great fun. We both get to pick things out to hang in our office for a couple of months. And
you'll see a great one shortly.
I plucked a great one out that is hanging on my humble office wall, and I get to enjoy it for a couple of months before it goes on and finds a new home somewhere else. So lots of interesting people, lots of interesting things, and every day is a little bit different. So we hope we can welcome you here in the gallery sooner rather than later, as we can do that safely, and enjoy the tour, and hopefully we can follow it up with something in person sometime soon. So great. Over to you, Lauren.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your lunch break.
Thank you. And so we'll probably see you in your office
great
in a little bit.
Okay. You'll get to enjoy the nice view that I have on my wall,
yeah,
even if it's only there for a month or two.
Right. Oh, I thought you were going to say the nice view from your window. No.
Well, yeah, maybe not so much that.
Yeah.
But.
Okay. You will come in. So, one of the things that people have asked as we sort of get started walking around is, how are things different? What's the difference now that, COVID is here? How have you kind of retooled? And the reality is, we've been doing live and digital auctions side by side for, a pretty good long time. So as people left the gallery, our staff also left the gallery and were working from home. And so when the sale happened, the real difference was nobody is here in the room except for the auctioneers. And that was just to keep the staff safe. And so we actually use Zoom. We have a staff of 22. We might have 15 people on Zoom with a list at home of people that they're going to call during the auction. And then the auctioneer has a Zoom view, and we are taking their bids as if they're in the room using Zoom. And remarkably, it worked. We were nervous the first time, but we've done several now, and It's not our intention to leave it that way because it's really so much more exciting when people are here. But it does work, and so we've been able to sort of keep the wheels on the road as you know, as we have gone through the last number of months. So I am going to hopefully walk you through without this being crazy shaky. Liz is behind the camera. I'm going to grab my mask. So when we walk around here, we're all wearing masks. And what I think I'm going to do first is we're going to go to the decorative arts group. If anybody out there who's watching has a specific kind of category that they're interested in, shoot that message across. But we'll probably look at a few things in the decorative arts, some pottery and some paintings. And Nan, who will be up in a little bit, is going to walk us through the specifics of this Banks auction and sort of how things happen here when we have a large collection like this. So should we see what happens? All right. So Liz is going to follow me, and hopefully we'll, in the process, you'll also see the beautiful setup in the gallery that Nan orchestrates. But then you'll also see some more of the kind of messy behind the scenes. So this is a chance for you to get an idea of some of what's been set up. Libby, are you going to be doing are you going to tell us about something you're looking at, or is just Karen going to?
I could share some.
Okay. Is there something you wanted to?
Do Karen first.
Okay, we're going to do Karen first.
I'll go grab it though. Okay.
I realize you probably can't hear me with my mask on. So one of the things that you'll see as we walk around is that from a staff perspective, we've kind of spread ourselves out into the gallery, into what would usually be a display area. But since people aren't coming in, we've sort of had our staff create their own workspaces in the gallery. And Karen is going to talk to us about some needlework that we have coming up in her newly created office space.
And Lauren, if you can hear me, it seems like someone is interested in early American furniture and art. So if there's a chance to talk about that, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. The Banks collection is all of that, and Nan is going to talk about that. So this is Karen Swagger. She's one of our fabulous Dec Arts and kind of smalls catalogers. And Karen's been in the field for a long time and has seen a lot of things, but one of her specialties is textiles and needlework. And she has a few she's going to show you.
Okay. As you can see, I'm kind of spilling out into the gallery
I
here.
can back up if you want to.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to, what's the best way to, so we have a great selection of needleworks coming up in our early October sale. And well, this is probably about 30 needleworks that will be coming up. The earliest is dated to around 1640. And this is it's actually one of my favorites. This is Charles I and his wife Henrietta and his son Charles II and his daughter Mary. And Charles II lost his head, and Charles I lost his head, and his son took over, Charles II. And Mary over here married William of Orange and later came back and ruled in England. But this is probably the earliest one we have, and I love the facial expressions. The mother is looking at her son and trying to kind of calm him down, and the father seems to be looking a little bit worried. But this is done in silk, and you'll see a lot of these same symbols of the different stag and lion and the castle up here. A lot of times they use mica in the windows with all these different motifs. Another one we have, most of these early needleworks that were done by young women or young girls usually had a biblical subject. And here is Abraham entertaining, providing hospitality to the angels. This one's probably about mid 17th century. Again, this is on silk. It has the typical lion and stag with the grotto, the castle in the background. It's got a lot of different types of elements to it, like this is called detached buttonhole. There's queen stitch. Some of these are kind of raised. We call it raised work. But this is, again, another early one. This is about the same time period, and this is actually a beaded needlework. The beads probably would have come from Venice and imported. You have the cavalier and lady, and again, you have these same motifs going through the stag and the lion. Some of the other symbols, like the parrot, was a symbol of domesticity. So they all had meanings of these different motifs. And again, this is probably about mid-17th century.
Karen, what are the estimates on these? Do you know off the top of your head?
Some of these are mainly around 2 to 4,
Thousand?
might be a couple 3 to 5. You know, they're not outrageous. A lot of these are in really good condition for, you know, the age of them. And then this is kind of an unusual one. Most of the needleworks are typically Old Testament, where this is probably New Testament. And this is, we think this is Mary Magdalene, and it's a former harlot. That's why she's bare-breasted. Not sure who this other gentleman is, but this is probably more like late 17th century. And this is metallic threads. But again, you have the same kind of symbols and everything in here. And but this is a really great one as well. But we have, I think the latest needlework we have is kind of the early 1800s. There's a few American, but they're mostly primarily British. But it should be a great sale. It's up online right now, so people can take a look at all of them.
Great.
All right, thanks.
We actually have 2 questions coming in about the estimates. Someone asking, you said 2 to 3, is that 100 or 1,000? And then 1,000. And then they also wanted to know how you determine the estimates.
We look at basically like comparables of what things have brought in similar auctions, and needleworks have varied in their of what kind of prices they bring in the market. So probably 15, 20 years ago, they may have brought more, but in the current market, we're looking at things that were, you know, this is about the range of what they're bringing. Hopefully they're going to bring a lot more, but, you know, that's the prices we're putting on them.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
We're, okay, so we're going to walk up to the front and take out another little vase. Libby's going to tell you about that, so we'll meet you up there.
Sounds good. And it looks like we also have some other people expressing interest in early pressed glass and Southern African art and carvings, if you have any of that.
Interesting. You want to get on the go on the outside, and I'll hand it out?
Yes. I don't know if we have too much fabric right now. So this is a little vase in the bank sale, little porcelain vase, enamel decorated. It was originally mounted as a lamp, so this is the base for the lamp. The lamp parts are over there. And this is called the Mille Fleur pattern, which translates to the 1,000 flowers. So you have chrysanthemums, lotus blossoms, peonies, and each one of these flowers, you know, has sort of symbolism in Chinese art, wealth, the lotus for purity. So the idea behind this whole piece is that all of these flowers sort of bestow their blessings onto you. Really richly decorated, enamel and gilt outlining, very fine gilt grounds. I don't know if you can quite see that.
Maybe if you put it on the black, it might show up.
It's really, really intricate. The Mille Fleur pattern was mainly popular during the Qianlong period, which is the mid to late 18th century, and then it carried on a little bit after into the dynasty right after, which is the Jiaqing period, which unfortunately they drilled a hole right through the rain mark to mount it as a lamp. But best guess is this is probably Jiaqing. But just a really unusual form with this sort of carved lotus mouth, which is a very important symbolism. Again, that one means purity in Chinese art. And this one has a 600 to 900 estimate, but it's really unusual. It'll probably do pretty well, and much go beyond the estimate.
So one of the things that we were talking about earlier is that sometimes when we have an object, you have a sense of what it is, but there might be sort of the devil in the details, and that over time, as you get closer to the sale, what happens?
Well, a lot of people kind of, if they have an idea on, you know, wanting to bid on something, they keep it all secret. You know, they don't want anybody else to know. And that's, I've noticed especially something that you'll see in Asian art from our last sale. You know, just in the last couple of days, people pour in with their bids, but they keep it, you know, their cards tight to their chest. They don't really want to let people know. But you're right about, you know, there are a lot of times where you want to kind of go on a little bit more of a lower estimate range, especially with Asian art, because I mean, it is so fine. The Qianlong period is most well known for sort of their execution in porcelain, just how perfect they get it. I mean, that is sort of like the height of Chinese right now, and that is what most people are going for, judging right after that, sort of picking on those same techniques and really beautiful, popular pieces. But you just, you know, nowadays people can do a really good copy, and you don't, you know, it's hard to tell, especially when you have a hole right through the rain mark. But we also have a great provenance for this piece, you know, with being the bank sale. So, you know, I'm sure this is probably judging, even though there is a drill right through the rain mark, which is extremely unfortunate. You know, that really kind of brings it down, but
So be it.
so be it.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned provenance. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you authenticate the works.
So in terms of the history, so this group that we're looking at, the examples that we're looking at today, they came out of this one particular collection, and I will let Nan go into that in a little more detail in a moment. But this particular collector was buying pretty early, and he bought from very well-known sources, and his record keeping was you know, unparalleled. So
the main provenance we have from this piece is really though just the banks, and he mainly bought American art and American furniture, and there's only a small sprinkling of Chinese art in this collection of his, and then the Chinese export punch bowl and a couple other pieces. So this wasn't his primary focus, but because he had such great record keeping, you know, kind of, you know, he bought from the best antique stores, from the best retailers. So, you know, it's
pretty good.
It's, you know,
pretty good bet.
Pretty good bet. This probably came from a good spot. But, you know, we had a previous sale where, you know, it was a large Chinese collection of arts, mainly from China, some from Japan. And it was from a family who moved to Shanghai and lived there for 40 years and had a trading operations. And that is like great provenance. Yeah. And, you know, I was listening to a couple lectures, and they talk about, you know, if it's a really great provenance, sometimes that can add 20 to 30% of value to a piece if it's really solid. But, you know, provenance sort of varies.
Gotcha.
Right. And someone's asking if the modification that you mentioned at the bottom, if that reduces the value of it.
It does.
Significantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. If this were complete, it would be a completely different thing, different animal. Yeah.
So, okay. Would you mind grabbing Laura?
Sure.
Yes. So Laura is going to take you into Andrew's office. Here she is. This is Laura Crockett.
Wear a mask?
Well, whatever you choose. So why don't you
come on in?
And maybe as we walk, you can just tell us what happens to items that don't sell at auction.
Sometimes they get reoffered with a lower estimate, if that's, you know, agreeable to the consignor. And sometimes they'll go back. If someone said, well, I would be willing to sell it if it goes for X, but if it doesn't, I just want it back. So we just have that conversation after the sale with the person who brought the item in. So Laura is one of our fine art specialists, and she's gonna give you a quick preview into something that's coming a little later. And I'm gonna bring you the brochure.
Yeah, in October, on the 3rd, we are going to be offering one of the best paintings I think I've been able to offer in my tenure here at Brunk Auctions. It's an important work by Milton Avery, done in the, I guess his breakthrough year for his mature period in 1957. It's called Birds Over Sea. Come on in and have a look at it. We we're fortunate to be able to bring this to the Asheville Art Museum while it was closed and shot it within the new space. And I have to say, the new museum was spectacular, and this painting was brilliant in that space. We received this painting from the estate of Luther Brady, who was a great friend to museums on the East Coast. I mean, many museums, like 5 or 6. But this painting will have probably the highest estimate that we've ever started with at auction at $800,000 to $9.2. And I look forward to seeing it going. I wish the Asheville Art Museum could buy it. It would mean a lot to me.
I'm sure that we do too.
We got to find somebody, you know, but it's very exciting to have it because I think this painting bridges the gap. It helps you understand Gottlieb. It helps you understand Rothko. He was very influential with many of the artists of the 20th century. And we can almost kind of see in this particular painting, he had another series called the Burst series, which you can kind of feel Gottlieb and that association in there with this kind of separation of color. I mean, he was one of the best colorists of the 20th century. But I believe that Gottlieb and Rothko inspired him to paint big, and he started painting in that summer, not just on paper like he always did, and he'd take it back to the studio and then do the large scale paintings. He painted this in Provincetown, 1957, and his younger friends inspired him to paint larger canvases, and likewise, yeah, he also he inspired them to also paint on paper. So you see these artists starting to experiment with painting oil on paper. And I honestly, when I look at this division of space, I can't help but think of Rothko and the way he composed his paintings. He went into kind of a dark period, and starting in 1957 and on. But you can't look at these artists and not think Milton Avery, because his influence was so great on these artists. So very excited to have this. Love for you to see it in person. Right now it's in Andrew's office. He gets to enjoy it. Yeah.
Can you tell us the artist and title again?
Oh, it's Milton Avery. It's Birds Over Sea, painted in 1957.
And what's the estimate?
Oil on canvas. I said it was 800,000 to $1.2 million, and it represents, I guess, the largest estimate that we've ever had at auction.
Right.
We've sold some great things. We sold Soul of Wit. We've sold Henry Moore, but in terms of all the art I've handled over the 22 some odd years, this one is a prize.
Takes the cake.
Absolutely.
That's great.
I will
Thank
put
you.
on my mask.
Yeah, put on your. So yeah, this is sort of what happens to our offices. We sometimes hang things that we love, and sometimes it's just things that are that are waiting for something else to happen to them. You know, maps and furniture taken apart. And because a couple of people have said that they're really interested in American furniture, we're going to walk back up to sort of where we started, and Andrew is going to take you through a piece of furniture. And this is something it's sort of an art form. We call it, you know, smoking something over, looking at it to see its authenticity and how was it put together.
While we walk, Lauren, do we mostly deal with estates versus single items? What would you say?
So I would say there's a, I don't know numerically if it's even, but it's probably close, because when we get an estate, it might be, you know, a couple hundred things, but then we might have 200 consigners in any given sale. So sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's a group of things, sometimes it's a private person, sometimes it's a dealer. Sometimes it's an estate where the owner's heirs have chosen to sell something. So here's Andrew, and he's going to, are you going to look at the Fife table?
Yeah.
Okay, or the Recamier, and also Nan is here too, and so this is where we can start talking a little more specifically about the bank sale.
So I mentioned before that William Banks was very focused on the classical period. This is sort of, you know, think Napoleon going into Egypt, 1815, 1820. all of the things of classical antiquity sort of inspiring like this new wave of sort of true classicism in decorative arts. And, you know, when you look at a table like this table was made probably by Duncan Phyfe in New York about 1815. And, you know, Duncan Phyfe is one of those names where, you know, it's become such a common name. People's like, oh, that's my Duncan Phyfe sofa, because his designs were copied, you know, regularly over the last 200 years. This probably really was made in his shop, his big New York shop. And, you know, there are a lot of details when we look at this that sort of conjure up classical antiquity and are typical of this period. The feet on this, for example, are painted with vert or verd antique, which is meant to emulate patinated bronze. So these are supposed to look like patinated bronze feet like you would find on a Roman table or, you know, or piece of the period. So the designers of the time are taking these elements and sort of recreating them into furnishings for, you know, for the homes of, you know, wealthy patrons of this time. This is, the veneers are rosewood and satinwood. It's brass inlaid. The figure here is called a caryatid figure. This beautiful sort of winged, you know, figure, again, sort of coming out of, you know, out of classical antiquity. And, you know, Phyfe used this, and another New York maker named André Lanuet, who was a French emigre maker, both made tables that look very similar. And the scholarship, you know, feels like that this is a Phyfe example. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
So could you name, say, 3 things that let you know that this is a period thing? In other words, made in the 1800s as opposed to something that was made in 1920?
A lot of the things there are sort of subtle nuances of things that tell us the answer to that. And a lot of them are a lot of the clues are on the underside of the table, or if you turn it over, you see, you get a better window into how it was made. And the tools that were used then, pre-industrial revolution, those sort of things really tell that story. And if we pull this table out, it's a really kind of neat detail here. Open this up. So this is so that you can turn the leaf over here, but you look in here, it has its original marbled paper in here. This is the original baize sort of washer to make sure it slides, you know, closed right. And, you know, the shrinkage cracks, the wear, the tool marks, you know, under close examination, all of these things add up to, you know, a convincing date, you know. And as with like, oh, that's my Duncan Phyfe sofa, the vast majority of what we see are sort of 1920s copies of these, because these were very popular in the colonial revival, just, you know, just like the sort of the earlier designs of Chippendale and Hepplewhite and things like that as well. But you know, we're often seen with tables upside down and drawers taken out, looking at all these sort of details to confirm. The market tends to be very picky about condition, and everybody wants to know every little detail of its 200-year history. What is cracked? What's repaired? You know, has it been regilt? Has it been repainted? You know, does it have a big shrinkage crack in the top, which like this, which they always do because of the way they were made. So a lot of what we do is very close scrutiny, making sure the market and the bidders out there have the highest level of confidence without seeing it in person. So we are acting as their eyes. They want to know that when this table arrives at their house with the trucker, that there are no bad surprises. They know what they're bidding on. So that's the scoop. Our biggest friend when we are looking at these is reading glasses and a very bright light. You know, the bright light really, just like with a painting, bright light or a black light is going to tell a lot of the story, but you just have to look closely. That's the real key to it. So.
Interesting.
Oh, sure. So I'm passing this then to Nan Zander, who is among the many hats that she wears here as our American painting specialist. And she has some really great paintings to show you, which is always fun. You know, like having great things in the room really makes us all light up here. So I'm sure she'll enjoy showing you some old friends.
I've been lit up for months with this sale. So I can't see anybody. You can see me. Excellent. So in thinking about what I was going to say about this William Banks estate, it occurs to me that what we do at an auction house is a lot like, this is a real Asheville metaphor. The Asheville metaphor for getting an auction to happen is a farm to table fish dinner. We go out there and we bait the line, we compete for the fish, we reel it in, we dress the fish, we serve it up on a platter, and then somebody gets to eat it. That is what we do when we are fighting for an auction. And this William Banks estate is in many ways a sort of perfect example of what an auction could and should be. We competed for this thing right after the shutdown started. We were able to do everything we needed to do to reel this estate in. Mr. Banks spent his lifetime filling up an amazing historic home in Noonan, Georgia, with, as you've seen already, classical American furniture and great 19th century American paintings and the decorations to go with it. So that is what he strove to do, to fill his house with great property that fit the home. So he was very specific about what he bought. He lived in a house designed by Daniel Pratt, who was a classical 19th century architect, mostly down in Milledgeville, Georgia, and Temple, New Hampshire, where he was born. William Banks found this amazing Gordon Banks house in Milledgeville, had it moved to his property in Noonan, Georgia, and also owned a house by Daniel Pratt in Temple, New Hampshire. So he's really sort of completed his circle. Mr. Banks divided his time between Noonan, Georgia, New York City, where he did most of his buying, and Temple, New Hampshire, and his other Daniel Pratt house. So his collection consisted of the great federal furniture that you've seen some of, 19th century paintings, Hudson River School, as well as a great collection of paintings by the Hudson River School artists painted in the White Mountains. So, he was very sort of cohesive in what he did. He bought great things and then put them in his home, and they never came on the market again. So a lot of the best paintings that I have here and the furniture that we have haven't been on the market since the 60s, early 70s, some in the 80s. He bought from the very best dealers and auction houses in New York and New England. A dream come true for us is that he saved all his information. We have pretty much every receipt and bit of provenance that he ever had. So he would buy something and save the receipts, gather all the provenance. And in addition to that, he was a great scholar himself, wrote frequently for the magazine Antiques, as well as other, well-known art periodicals, gave lectures on his art and architecture. He was passionate about art and architecture as well. Lent his paintings to museums, sat on boards of museums. He was a lifetime member of the board of the High Museum in Atlanta. Was very, very active and just spent his life giving back to the community, the art community. So people revered him. When we got this collection, people, he was a well-loved collector, connoisseur, and scholar, and people came from, all over the country came metaphorically, we were in a lockdown, to hear about the collection, view it, and hopefully buy it. So we went down to Noonan, Georgia with our crew, hung the paintings on the walls. Part of what we have to do is market these things, put our beautiful catalog together. So we hung the paintings in situ with the furniture, photographed them there, carried everything back to Asheville, brought it in-house, started doing our research. This was in, I guess it was early April that we went down. So we've had the property in-house since then to do all our research, which he made very easy in many ways with all of his records. We photographed it again here. We started putting our catalog together and, making sure we had every loose end tied up. And then we put our catalog together, hung the paintings in this exhibition, And here we are now off to the races selling these things. For me, it's sort of the lifetime auction, because his painting collection is one masterwork after another of the Hudson River School and American 19th century genre paintings. So I don't know if you can see behind me. Oh, I think we have slides. We have a slideshow. I've chosen 3 of the highlights of the 19th century paintings to talk briefly about and sort of illustrate what was so great about his collection. And I think we have one slide coming. It's like being in our history class. The first one should be an Asher B Durand, which I think you're all seeing. Liz, give me the high sign. Is the slide up? Excellent. So this is Asher B Durand, who was a contemporary of Thomas Cole's while Thomas Cole was still alive, you've probably all heard of Thomas Cole if you're involved with the museum, considered to be the founder of the Hudson River School, although he never considered himself that, and there was no Hudson River School to speak of. One well-known American scholar has referred to the Hudson River School as America's first artistic fraternity. And when you learn about them, they all studied each other's work. They studied with each other. They traveled together. They exhibited together. They formed together the academies and institutions that created the first American respected art world, National Academy of Design, Metropolitan Museum of Art. So they were all influenced by each other and worked together and put us on the map for art in the 19th century. So Asher Durand first became an artist while Thomas Cole was still alive. He was really Thomas Cole's only rival while Cole was alive. Urged his contemporaries to paint in the great outdoors, strove for naturalism, pushed naturalism in landscape painting, as opposed to Cole, who was much more of a dramatist and a romantic painter. Cole died in 1848. Asher Durand lived for a very long time and sort of bridged the gap between the Luminists, who you see behind me on the wall, maybe, and the first generation Hudson River School paintings. So what you see in this Durand is the White Mountains. It's Franconia Notch on one side, or the town of Franconia. And across the river, you see the village of South Woodstock, New Hampshire. So artists had started going up to the White Mountains not too long before this, because that was the wilderness on the eastern seaboard. The White Mountains were difficult to get to and difficult to explore. Once they opened up and artists could go there, it became a very popular destination, and the artists would spend their summers sketching together in the White Mountains. So Durand brought along with him on many of his trips Kensett. Can we segue to the next slide? This is John F. Kensett. This is this is an iconic painting by Kensett of Beacon Rock in Newport, Rhode Island. And Kensett was one of the founders of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, like Durand. Traveled with all the artists, started going to Newport in the early 50s, continued to visit Newport. It became one of his favorite subjects until he died in 72. This was an early Newport painting for him, 56. It was painted 1856. It takes that bright, sunny, luminous sky that you saw in the first Durand, really carries it forward into serious luminism, what became known as luminism, where the artists were no longer concerned so much with, where they were specifically as they were with light and atmosphere. So this painting, one of his first Newport Beacon Rock scenes, he places you there in that place with the great big cliffs in all their detail, the far horizon, the ships and the figures giving you some sense of scale, but it really becomes almost a blank slate for him to paint atmosphere and light, which he did like nobody's business. There's a very similar painting to this on a much larger scale in the National Gallery in Washington. There's also one in the Kummer Gallery. He repeated it over and over again because people liked it. It was also a great destination for patrons and wealthy Americans with all the mansions in Newport. But it really became, sort of the perfect vehicle for Kensett to do what Kensett did best. The last slide I want to show you is Sanford Gifford, and this is another White Mountain scene. Right behind me, this was painted also in 1856. Gifford happens to be my personal all-time favorite artist, so having all of these paintings in here and for a while hanging in my office has been an amazing treat for me, and the quality level of these paintings is really unsurpassed on the market as a group altogether. So again, this Gifford is the same year, not quite as modern and abstract in feeling as the Kensett. Gifford had gone up to the White Mountains in, I think, 54 for the first time, and continued to visit the White Mountains for the rest of his life because, like Newport was to Kensett, the White Mountains were one of Gifford's favorite places to go and paint, and he did that over and over and over again. This being one of his earliest White Mountain paintings, it's still quite painterly and telling of details of place, as opposed to his later works, which become, like Kensett's, very abstract and only about atmosphere and light wherever he was painting, whether it was, this country, or he painted a number of wonderful and some of his most famous paintings in Italy later on. So this is a great Kensett, a great Gifford that sort of bridges Gifford's two phases of his career, like the Durand bridged early, the first generation of the Hudson River School and all its naturalism with the luminism that would come later. This Gifford is sort of one foot for him in his luminist future, and I think the foreground scenery is quite, still quite telling in its detail and early for Gifford. I hope that made sense. So I think another wonderful thing about the Kensett and the Gifford is some of the finest Hudson River School paintings were painted on a small scale. The Durand that you saw was a great big exhibition scale painting. It was hung in the National Academy of Design after Durand painted it. And often paintings were created for that purpose. They are exhibition paintings. But when you're painting, these smaller Newport, Rhode Island, or this White Mountain scene, these intimate scenes without a lot of figures, without a big village in them, no Rocky Mountains, no, Indians and teepees, it makes sense to have them on a small scale because they're intimate scenes and they're quiet and they're meditative, and they speak to sort of peace and tranquility rather than drama. So they work very well on a small scale. They're also easy to hang in your house. That sort of is it for me. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, we had a couple of questions come in. So one person was actually referring to the frames, and I think it's for the second painting that you showed. They were wondering if the frame is original or if it's just period.
Sure. Well, the frames on all the pictures I was talking about, I believe, are period frames. Often the artist did frame the paintings themselves, and that's really completes the package, of course, in a wonderful way. If they're not original frames, you want them to at least be period. The frame on the Durand is a great period frame, quite possibly original. The Kensett is also a very good period frame. I don't believe the Gifford is a period frame, but reproduction frame makers do a wonderful job, and they are actually reproducing, a good one is reproducing a period frame. They own frames that they then reproduce and cast just like the original. So, a great painting of this caliber should be in a great frame. It completes the package and really does it justice.
Right. And someone else, you had mentioned, you know, your metaphor with Asheville reeling in the auction. They wanted to know how you negotiate for a collection to be the auction house that represents that collection.
It's always different depending on what you're doing, and you know you want to offer the person that is selling what's going to work for them. So you have to take into account where the collection's located, what it is that you'll be selling, the value of the pieces. It's always different. I mean, there are the same factors in every you know case. Price, value, proximity is one thing. I mean, we are in Asheville, but we go anywhere. We do pick up collections where we need to pick them up. If we want to get some things, if it's very high value property, boy, we'll do everything we can to get them. That's what we do. We want to sell things. We need property in order to keep having auctions. So we work out whatever we need to work out. I mean, does that make sense? I can't see you in your head.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes. Great. I think those are all the questions that came in specific to this. There are a few other questions that are a little bit more general that have come in. Let's see. Looks like.
Can you give us a go? We're all here.
Yeah, someone was asking. Let's see. What is the oldest item that you have ever put up for auction?
Ooh.
The what?
The oldest item you've ever sold.
Maybe some ancient glass.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think
Antiquities.
our name-
So we're going to go back to
Well, just
Corey
answer
Jones
the
now.
question and then we'll go.
Probably, you know, hard to say, but probably something in the antiquities department. And something from ancient Rome, an ancient Roman coin or gold or something. I don't know specifically, but that makes sense that that's what it would be, an antiquity of some sort.
Right. Great. And then there was one other question about, do you have art or furniture restoration practitioners on staff or to recommend in the area?
We don't have any on staff. We have a painting conservator here in Asheville who's quite wonderful that we recommend. We also do give people names of places that they can go if they need work done on things. But no, we're not like a museum. We don't have a conservation department.
Great.
That's not a part of what we do.
Perfect. Well, I think that's about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we are, I don't know, we have a little time left, 5 minutes-ish. We're going to walk back. One of the things that this area is known for is its great history with ceramics. And so Corey, who's running away from us right now, is going to talk to us a little bit about a collection of ceramics that we have in. Some of you may have heard of the potter Dave Drake. He's kind of a well-known potter. Corey will tell you about him. Part of why he is well-known is because there's a lot of documentation about his work. He was African-American. He had been enslaved, but he was also literate. And so he writes things on his pot sometimes. And so it's a really kind of compelling story. His work is really something that you can kind of sink your teeth into. Corey Jones is our ceramics specialist, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of the pieces that we have here. Over to you.
Thank you. My name is Corey. I am a pottery specialist here at Brunk Auctions. And as you can see, I've arranged some pottery here for our viewing and some explanation. This is all from the Edgefield district of South Carolina. Some different makers here, different forms, different glazes, and essentially American alkaline glazed ceramics started in the Edgefield district. I think it started about 1819 at the Pottersville Pottery, which was owned by Dr. Abner Landrum. He was the first person to start using alkaline glazes, which is essentially a high pH glaze. It is in the Asian tradition. Previously, glazes were typically lead glazed, red earthenwares, and salt glazed earthenwares, more northern origins. But he was the first one to start using alkaline glazes in the United States. His forms are pretty specific to handled storage jars, and pitchers and jugs and things of that nature. So his pottery existed, I think, from 1819 to about 1850. It changed hands several times over the years, but he was responsible for one of the most prolific potters of the period. Dr. Abner Landrum and Harvey and Reuben Drake apprenticed a young African-American potter named David Drake, or actually his name was Dave at the time. He was a slave potter. He was owned by Harvey Drake, but learned to pot at the Pottersville factory. And history thinks that he was taught by Harvey Drake because Harvey Drake's pieces, he was a potter as well, are very, very similar to Dave's in glaze and in form. And so we think that Harvey Drake taught Dave. So Dave potted for a very, very long time. He potted, I think his earliest dated piece was around 1829, and his last dated piece was 1864. So he was known for signing and dating his pieces. And here are some examples of his signatures and dates here. And there's some other examples here. There's different glazes, different time periods, some different forms. That was very unusual for pieces to be signed and dated at the time. There's some traditions of decoration during the period from other potters that came from other parts of the country and traveled to Edgefield, but you know, signing and dating pieces was, you know, pretty unheard of, especially for an African-American slave potter. There was an anti-literacy law enacted, I think, in the 30s or 40s, which prohibited you from teaching your slaves to read or write. But Dave was owned by some people who were highly educated and, you know, taught him to read and write. And he actually worked at an Edgefield newspaper called The Hive that Dr. Abner Landrum, you know, let him work at. So we think that Dr. Abner Landrum taught him how to read and write there at the Hive, and we don't know what his job specifically was there, but we think that's where his love of the language came from. Dave was also known for putting inscriptions on his works. We have one jar here that of the period is the fourth known earliest dated inscripted piece. You can't see it. The inscription is really faint across here, and the date is 12 of April of 1836. It's kind of hidden under the alkaline glaze there, but it can be made out with a little bit of effort. Actually, the inscription says catenation, which is kind of like a scientific term to mean be bonded to. The earliest known dated inscripted piece was dated, and it said concatenation on it. So the first one said concatenation. There were two other scripted pieces between that one and this one. Dave was also known for putting poems and writing various inscriptions on his pieces over the course of his lifetime. His inscripted pieces run from, the early 1829 to 1864. There's 169 known dated, signed, and inscripted vessels. Some examples of his poetry are found in many publications, and examples of these scripted pieces are in many institutions throughout the country. One is a holiday message. 19 days before Christmas Eve, lots of people, after it's over, how they will grieve, is one of his inscriptions on a piece, which, you know, is, you know, unheard of at the period and pretty unknown for an African-American potter of that period, because there were, I think they're thinking there were 60 other known African-American potters named and working in the various potteries in the Edgefield district. The only one scripting, signing, and dating pieces, with the exception of maybe one other potter, was Dave. Another example of his poetry is here is 1859, until you all I feel inclined. That was from 1859, April the 18th. Another one from the 4th of July on 1859. The 4th of July is surely come to blow the fife and beat the drum. So various dates in poetry by Dave. There was a period in time he changed. Dave was changed. Owners changed hands. I'm sorry. Dave changed hands from different owners over the course of his entire existence in Edgefield. There was a period where he was owned by Dr. Abner Landrum's brothers, Reverend John Landrum and B.F. Landrum. And in that period, there are no signed and dated vessels known, and no scripted vessels, no poem vessels. So it was thought that those gentlemen were sticklers for laws and rules of the time, and didn't want their servants reading or writing or scripting any vessels. After that, he was again, he changed hands to Lewis Miles, and that is his most prolific period of scripting vessels. I think of the 45 versed vessels, I think 20 something of them were done during that period in the ownership of Lewis Miles. So that he was freed in 1865 under the Freedman Law, at which point he went to the Edgefield District County Courthouse and applied for his freemanship, and he signed his name David Drake after one of his first owners, Harvey Drake. We think he died after 1873 sometime, and in 1872 the Edgefield High did a little write-up on him, and a little story about him and his wonderful jugs. There's other examples here of different makers. This is a Colin Rhodes piece, who was a prolific maker of the time period. He did some decorative wares, mainly known for kaolin slip decoration, and the beautiful runny celadon green glazes. These other pieces here are some Lewis Miles pieces.
Corey, we have a couple of questions. One is, what are those catalog numbers here? What can you tell us about the tags? And is that a children's book about him, or is that,
These are just inventory tags.
What is?
These are just inventory tags on the pieces. That's how I keep up with what is what.
And then
what's in my hand is a Dave Drake Potter and Poet book. It was done by the Vero Beach Museum by a gentleman named, I think, Carl Steen, who is a scholar on Dave. I think he might have worked at the McKissick Museum for a period of time, and a lady named Corbett Toussaint, who actually put on the event down there. So it talks about some of his scripted pieces versus, and it's basically just a catalog for the Vero Beach Museum of Art of his
What's the name of the book that was written about Dave recently? It was very popular.
I think someone just mentioned.
Yeah.
There's a book called I Made
Dave
This
the
Jar.
I made this. Yeah.
There's been a bunch of books written. I Made This Jar. There's another catalog from the McKissick Museum when they did a big showing of his pottery. And there's several other things. There's different scholars writing different things about him.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other questions?
That's it.
I actually have a question. I was just wondering, are Drake's works, are they meant to just be decorative, or were they created with a purpose, the jugs?
Oh, they're created with a purpose. These were made to be used, and a lot of them haven't survived over the years and have damage. These were storage jars made to hold various things: lard, beef, pork, meats of the period. The tall form down there on the end, I believe to be a churn with a repaired rim. So I think it was actually a functional churn. Everything he made was made to be used. He has a lot of jugs, which we don't have an example of here, but a lot of the jugs you'll find with the handles broken off and the spouts broken off, and you'll just have the body left. But there are surviving jug forms that are dated and scripted. A few just sold recently in the marketplace and did pretty well. So yeah, all his stuff was not made to be decorative. It was made to be used. And his pieces have turned up all over the South and in northern, homes. But I think his first piece turned up in 1919 at the Charleston Museum. Nobody knew what it was. It was a big, huge piece with his name on it and a verse on it, and they put a sign on it at their institution. If anybody knows what this is, please let us know. So these were things made to be used.
Someone asked how much these pots usually go for. Do you know the estimates of any of these off the top of your
I
head?
know some of the estimates, and they vary. We sold one, I think, last year with a $40,000 to $60,000 estimate. It was the most pristine, I think, one that had come to market in quite some time. The glaze and script were just perfect. It sold, I think, all in for $180,000. There are some script vessels that I believe have changed hands privately for, close to 7 figures. Some of these are in really good shape. A couple of these have repairs, but a pre-auction estimate for some of these pieces would be, 20 to 30,000, 40 to 60,000. Ones with repairs, 10 to 20,000. It depends on if his signature is on there, how well the script is, what are the apologies, meaning repairs, cracks, chips, and the glaze.
Great.
Jug forms are also a little rare, so they tend to fetch a little higher in the marketplace as opposed to a rare signed jar. Like I mentioned before, a lot of those didn't survive their handles and spouts being broken off.
Thank you, Corey. So if anybody has any additional questions for Corey, send them on. He's here and happy to tell you more, show you more. And if you turn around, you can see how many more jugs there are coming up.
What's his background? What has him interested in pottery?
What has me interested in pottery? Well, I'm not just an Edgefield specialist. I worked in another auction house, and we'd be selling all kinds of pottery, and it would just blow my mind how different people would come in and look at a piece of pottery and say, that's a piece of Georgia pottery, or that's a piece of Alabama pottery, or that's a piece of North Carolina pottery. So after working at an auction house for a period of time and meeting all these pretty knowledgeable individuals, I just got in, I said, well, how can I, what's the difference? How do they know the difference? And I got involved in different forms in different glazes, and different clay bodies come from different areas. And there's so many different clay pottery centers. Basically, Edgefield started the alkaline tradition, and then it branched out to different states. And I wanted to see how that tradition was, taken into its own in the different areas. And it was in different forms of glaze and different clay bodies. And that got me interested. How could somebody walk through them and tell, well, that pottery's from Tennessee, or that pottery's from Alabama, or that pottery's from Georgia? And it was really interesting to me there was a certain time period that if you wanted to store something, you had to go make something to store it. So I couldn't imagine way back in the day going out and digging up a whole bunch of clay, hauling it back to my house, milling it in a mill, and actually turning wares, and then having to cook them so that you could store your meat and stuff. And that tradition pretty much happened up until the late 1800s, turn of the century, early 1900s, and then northern manufacturing stonewares kind of got shipped down into the South, and those traditional utilitarian potters died out and kind of went into the art pottery fields, or tourist trades. But that's what got me into it, being able to walk to a room and be able to tell where a piece of stoneware was from, just due to glaze and form.
We have one more question. How did they cook them? What did they use as kilns?
A lot of people used groundhog kilns. They said the Pottersville pottery used what they called an Asian dragon kiln, which is pretty much a long, drawn-out kiln. And what you would do is you would make your wares, let them dry out in the sun, and then you would glaze them. And an alkaline glaze is essentially wood ash, lime slate, sand, and other clay. You would dip them in your clay, in your glaze. You'd set them in your kiln, and then you would heat up. You burn a whole bunch of wood for a long period of time, a lot of times overnight, and it would get to such a high degree that the glaze on the exterior of the pots would vitrify. So there's different kinds of kilns. There's groundhog kilns, kind of longer tunnel kilns, but they were all, the glazes were vitrified through wood.
I think those are all the questions we have.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you, Corey.
I think we're just about out of time, but happy to answer their questions. One, I just wanted to show you one kind of crazy thing that we have, because while we do sell art and furniture and ceramics, sometimes we also sell classic cars. All right, tell me you don't want a Lincoln Continental. Look at that. Suicide doors.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So this is fun. We've just been like, you can kind of hang out in it. Want to come sit in the back? Come on over. So also, I just wanted to say to everyone who's watching, obviously, we're right here. We're always happy to answer any questions. If you want to sell something, or you're interested in collecting something, or you just don't really know what you have, we're very happy to, throw our knowledge out there to our community. We have a great group of specialists who know, far more about topics than what you've seen today, just kind of like scratching the surface. So, sometimes we do like an heirloom discovery day. Most especially one of the specialist people who's not here today is Katie Simonetti, who's our jewelry specialist, and she is very knowledgeable. We sell a ton of jewelry, and that's one of those things that ends up in a lot of the states, and she's always happy to help people understand what the value is. Sometimes that means you want to keep it, and sometimes that means you want to sell it, and that's all good. But she's definitely here. That's a pretty common question. But if anybody has any other questions that we didn't answer today, just feel free to reach out.
Lauren, if someone wanted to attend one of your upcoming auctions, how would they do that?
Well, so there's like the reality of today, and then there's what we hope will go back to normal. Generally speaking, they just show up. Our auctions are open to the public. All of that is on our website. The dates of the auctions, when the preview times are, when the actual auction takes place. Since we have the government mandates, we have not had folks here live for the auctions. This William Banks sale is the first time we'll have anyone in the sale room. It's going to be a very limited number of people, but we are taking reservations for that. And I think we're just going to kind of play it by ear going forward to see how things are going, and are we in phase 2.5 or 3, or we'll just play it by ear. But we'll always keep that kind of information public on our website.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, and to your team for sharing all their knowledge with us today. It's been great, and I think, I mean, I visited once before with our interns, but I'm sure everyone would really get a kick out of going to your auction house and seeing what you have on view, since it changes constantly. So
it does, and we welcome you. We miss having folks here. It's really so much fun. This is what we love about it, is when there are people that have questions, that are curious, that we can sort of share what we know. So we welcome your questions and your good selves right here.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And I also want to thank all our members for being here today. I hope to see you all again at these future virtual programs or at the museum. And as a reminder, I'll send out the evaluation in just a little bit to get your feedback. And we'll be posting this recording tomorrow in our eBlast and on YouTube. So you can check out anything you missed or go back and visit a favorite item that was shown today. All right. Well,
Thank you, everyone. Good.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.